Okay, so this week, chapter 6 is about manipulating strings. So in the past, you guys were working with strings, but there's things that you wanted to work, but you couldn't quite make it work. And what I get by that is we talked a little bit about string literals, in which case, say you have Alice's cat with the apostrophe in there. If you try to put it all in one, it does not work. So if we look at that here, covered that a little bit already. If I have something like string equals hello Alice's cat, something like that will not work. So to fix that, we have to use double quotes is one way to do it. So we can have something like hello Alice cat. And we can see that that works with the double quotes. Another way to do it is to escape certain characters. So if you use a backslash, it will escape the next character after it. So if we go back and do this first one, copy this back in here. If we put a backslash in front of it, it will accept it. So we have hello Alice's cat there as well. So there's a couple different things that you can use as escape characters. So backslash and then a single quote will print as a single quote, backslash and a double quote, backslash T is equal to a tab, so it'll add a tab to the space. So if I look at this one here, come back to this string, and in this one I have that, but before Alice's cat I have a slash T in there. You will see that I have slash T. Now it's taking it literal because I have the other quote in there, but if we do something like you'll see that it keeps it there. So why is it taking that? Because we need to set up inside of there slash ins or slash T. So slash in is going to be a new line break. Slash slash is going to keep a backslash in there. It's got to flow within the new section. So if we do something like string 2, hello cat, it's not liking the T whatsoever. But if you put the R in front of it, you can use raw strings, and that just completely ignores all escape characters, prints backslashes, prints apostrophes in there, however you want it to use it. So a raw string is simply string 4 equals R, then you're starting with your quote. So hello. Now if I look at string 4, it's going to have the raw version of what that is, which is going to be a double backslash, etc. in there. So again, it's two ways to modify your characters. The simplest one for most of what you guys will use is use double quotes when you need to use double quotes. If you have a apostrophe somewhere inside of your line. Instead of having a bunch of new line characters, you can also have a triple single quote. And what that will do is allow you to print on multiple lines. So if I do something like string 5 equals Now if I look at string 5, it's going to have all the new line characters in there. If I tell it to print string 5, it's going to print it out almost like a form letter set. So it'll save all those characters in there. So if you're printing a bunch of information all at once, this can be beneficial if you're doing your headers, like say in your midterm project, right? And you're doing a text adventure and you want all this text to come out on the screen, but you want it to for sure start a new line character all the way through. This is how you could do that. You could format it the way you want it with the new lines where you want it. You can also do multi-line comments, which we've talked a little bit about. This is something you will use on your midterm. So if you were in a actual file, and typically you have the blah, blah, blah up here at the top, the first 3. But I got to put a hashtag in front of each one of those. If I'm going to describe my project, I would use 3 double quotes and say, this is an example of multi-line or I can do that. And I can also do multiple lines. Anything I want inside of here can all be copied in here. Where that's beneficial is, one, if you're commenting up your project, but you could also use it if I have an entire block of code. Instead of having to go through and grab each one with a hashtag, I can just put 3 quotes before the block of code I want to comment out, 3 quotes after that, and it comments out the whole section. Some of you might have seen you can highlight a bunch of this text, go up to format and comment out region. It puts in the hashtag sides of it for you. But that can be a little bit harder to read, or if you don't want to do it that way, you can also use block comments in order to do that. Remember, on the midterm project, you got to have lots of block comments, lots of comments. Without everything, it's much easier to use these block style comments than one single line comment. That can be in the main program itself. It could also be within the function as well. So it's really nice to do that within the function at the very top to explain what that comment is doing, or what that function is doing, sorry. We talked a little bit about indexing and slicing strings, treating them like lists in a way. So you have indexes. If I have a string of hello world, each one of these is an index. We talked about that before. And you can call on those specific indexes. If you do slices, where I only want the first 5 of a string, you can return only the first 5 characters. So say you have somebody type in a name, but you only want to store the first 12 characters of whatever they typed in. Then you would just trim it down to 12, and that way you know that in the rest of your program, you can format headers out and that it'll always accept up to 12 characters. You can do any kind of styling and design you want there. We talked about the not in and in, no different than strings and lists and such. You can get a Boolean back in true and false. So you could do if hello in hello world. If that returns true, it would come back. If hello in hello, that would return, etc. Anybody have any questions over those up to this point? Okay. Remember that strings themselves are exact, they're case sensitive, etc. So if you try to look for capital C's, for example, here they're looking for capital hello and hello world, it's not going to find it. It must be the same capitalization, spacing, etc. that's inside of that. From here, we're going to use string methods. So you guys remember list methods where you had append, delete, etc. You also had methods on top of dictionaries. Do you guys remember what those were? Things like keys, values, items. Those were all methods to that. Well, we also have methods on strings. And the first methods we'll talk about is upper, lower, is upper, and is lower. So down here, I could have a string 6 equals hello world. And if I look at string 6, I get back hello world. I actually had an extra quote in there, that's fine. What I can do is I can do string 6 dot upper, and that's going to return everything as uppercase characters. I could also do string 6 dot lower, and it returns everything as lowercase characters. So what you can do is you can manipulate somebody's input coming into you. If you always want it to be capital letters, but they may have not typed capital letters, you can set whatever string that they had, change it and convert it to an uppercase, convert it to a lowercase. You can also make sure that a string is lowercase. So if I do string 6 dot is lower, would turn back true or false. So right now, string 6 does not have all lowercase. It's got a combination, right? So if we look at string 6, this is what it looks like. If I convert it over, so string 6 equals string 6 dot lower. Now string 6 is going to be all lowercase, in which case if I run string 6 dot is lower, it will return true. I can also check for uppercase. So string 6 dot is upper would return back false. If I wanted to actually set it, I would do string 6 equals string 6 dot upper. Now we can see it's all uppercase. String 6 dot is upper will return back true. So very handy for manipulating different strings. Notice I set it as a new string. In this case, I just replaced the old string. So if we look at the messages here, I have string 6 equals string 6 dot upper. You can also set that to a new variable. So I could do string 6 upper equals string 6 dot upper, and therefore my variable of string 6 upper is all the uppercase version of that. So those are really good methods that you will use as you're going through. Some other fun ones that work really well is alpha. So what's nice about is alpha is it makes sure that it's just letters and that none of it's blank. So if you are asking for somebody's name and they give you numbers, you can run is alpha on it, and if it returns false, then you could have them come back and retype that back in, put them back in that while loop. And at the end of your while loop, one of your checks is alpha, which means it's only looking for alphanumeric, in this case, alpha characters. It's going through. You could do alnum, which is looking for alphanumeric characters and is not blank. So if they say, what's your name? And they just hit enter and don't type anything in, this will check to see whether it's blank. And if it's blank, it'll return back false as well. Is decimal, where if you just want numeric characters and no letters in it, you can use is decimal. Is space is going to make sure that it only consists of space, tabs, new lines, etc., but is not blank. And is title, which is what you typically would use for a name, where the first letter is a capital letter followed by a bunch of lowercase letters. Does everybody understand those string methods? It's a great way to sanitize your input, right? So before, you guys had to check and make sure that they were typing it incorrectly. If it was letters, how are you checking to see if it was letters or numbers? By trying to convert it into an integer or a string, right? If it didn't convert, then you knew it was false. Now you can just use a method right on that string and return whether or not it's true or false. So very handy in a while loop in combination with if statements, so that you can sanitize and clean up the input as you want it to come in. So from this part forward, I expect all of your guys' input to be clean, sanitized. You have these nice string methods that are going to help make that easy for you without a bunch of lines of code. So don't write a bunch of if statements, elifs, etc. to try to clean up your code. Use these methods in order to make it easier for you. That way you don't have to type so much. You also have two more additional string methods. You have starts with and ends with, and this allows you to check whether or not your string starts with something or ends with something. To test those, you can just come in here and I can do string 6, see what it looks like right now. So I can check to say string 6 dot starts with, and I want to say it starts with world. It's going to come back as false, right? If I say, does it end with string 6 dot ends with, and I want it to end with a exclamation point. Is this going to be true or false? What do you think? False? Correct? Why is it false? Anybody tell me why it could be false? It's because really there's that extra little quote I had in there, right? So if I check it now it comes back as true. So if I deleted that little last character in there, so if I reset string 6 equals hello now, if I did string 6 ends with I should get true. So it's a great way to check if something's at the beginning of your string, end of your string. You can also use join and split. Those two methods are beneficial if you want to join a bunch of things together. So for example, if I had a list inside of my program and I wanted to join those all together into one string, and I want to join those together with a comma, then I can use whatever I want to join them together with. So let's just have a list here real quick. My list equals John, Jane, Jim. And I print back my list. I'm going to get something like this, but I want to have it in a string format so I can print it nicely. I don't want to have something like print my list, because to the end user, that's going to print it with brackets, and so that's not a very clean output. But if I do something like, let's do them with a comma, so something that looks like that, comma with a space in between, and I do a join, then I can pass in a list. So I would use something like my list, and I would get back John, Jane, and Jim. Notice there's not an and in between there, which is different than your last homework assignment when you guys were having to add that and in there. Or not a homework assignment, but your practice assignment that you guys were working on. You could add that in there. If I want to do something else in between there, say I want to put exclamation points with no space, dot join, my list, I can get something like that back. I could print them on new lines if I wanted to. So I could do something like here with the slash in, right? That's my new line, dot join, my list. It's going to put the slash in there. If I return that back as a new string, so if I do string 7 equals slash in dot join, my list. Look at what string 7 is now. Okay, that looks good. But if I print string 7, now it prints each one on a different line. Yeah.
So were you just add the exclamation point?
Yes.
Why did it only put it on John and Jane and not on Jim?
It doesn't add it to the last one unless you tell it to. So by default, if you look down here at your dot join, so if I do exclamation point dot join, inside here, it's going to concatenate all the ones that you have in between there. Just like it did up there with the commas, when it's joining Jim in there, it doesn't put one at the end as well. It's only when it starts joining those strings together. So you'll see them at the joins. Good question. Anybody else have any questions? When you come inside here, so you've got join, you can also split. So if you want to take a string in from somebody, say you say, hey, I want you to put in your name. So we take name, right? Name equals input, and we have to type in a name. So I type in Jason Zeller. Okay, so now I have name. I can do name dot is title. We can find out that's true, which means I used a capital letter, then undercase, and then when after the space, it checks for a capital letter and lowercase. I can then split that up to find out if I want just first name and last name. So I can do something like first equals name dot split, and I tell it what I want to separate on. So if I do sep equals space, now first is going to be Jason and Zeller as a 2-line list. Does that make sense? So it splits it up and then creates a list out of it. What I could really set it as is first name is now equal to first 0, right? I know that the first chunk is going to be coming in. So first name is now just Jason. I can then specify last name equals first 1. And now last name is equal to Zeller. It's also nice, you can split on just anything you want. Here I did a space, I could split on commas. So if you say, hey, give me a list of comma separated values of all the information you want to pull in from a user. You can then tell it to split on commas and then dump that into a list. With the list, you can do a for loop through it and start adding things to your program. So there's a couple different ways you can interact with some information from different people. I could split on spaces, I could split on characters and letters. So if I split on something like M here and my name is Simon, notice that it kind of chops up the sentence as a whole. You could split on new line characters if you chose to do so. So if you split on /ins, it's going to break that up as a list. And then you could proceed to put that list through a for loop in order to print that out as well. So join and split are also really good string methods as well. Anybody have any questions on the methods that we've covered so far? So if we recap before we go on, take a look back up here. Lists can be strings can work like lists in that they have indexes and you can slice them. You can use not in and in operators to find out if something is in a string. Upper, lower, is lower in order to do checks against strings. You can then also check whether it's an alpha, is alphanumeric, is decimal, is space, is title. Starts with and ends with, and then joint and split. There's a few more that you can do with strings. You can do right justification, left justification, and center. So this is kind of handy if you're trying to format out, say, a menu in your program or something like that. You can do justifications in there. So say I do something like print. I tell it to print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hashtags. And I put my last quote in there and I tell it to dot center. And I want 5 spaces on each side of everything. So I tell it the width of the total string that I want it to be. So say 15. Actually, let's make it 16 so it's even. 16 and the character that we want to fill with. So if we do fill character with spaces for now, we'll just leave that. Enter. I forgot my other comma. All right, so we see this here. I told it a maximum of 16 characters all the way across, which means if we had 10 characters in here, I should have how many spaces on each side? 3, right? 1, 2, 3. There's 3 spaces there. 1, 2, 3 spaces after that. So it's whatever your string is, we're going to center it based on this number of print value. Note that a typical terminal window when somebody runs your program is typically 80 characters wide. So if I wanted to print this to make sure it was center for a standard window when somebody executes code, I could copy that same thing. I would probably do something slightly less than 80 characters so that it looks neat on there. Get another space. So note this centers it between the entire terminal window. Now, how could I make this piece of code even shorter yet?
You can just do 60 for the hash.
With what?
With one hashtag.
With just one hashtag? Is that what you're saying? So if I just do one hashtag dot center and do 60, it'll just center one hashtag, right? But we noticed I have multiple hashtags there, right? And say I want to have 10 hashtags. What can you guys use that you learned day 2 in order to make this a little bit cleaner in the code? String replication, right? So if I have this string and I take that times 10, right? That's going to print out 10 hashtags. There we go. If I do the same thing, print hashtag times 10. And then do something like dot center. I think I got my dot in the wrong spot there. Yeah. So you could just say intro equals hashtag times 10, like that. Print intro dot center 60, and then it would print it out there as well. The reason you might do that is so that if you go into a print function and it's a function that you create that prints out the header, you tell it it's always going to be 60 characters wide, so I can pass in any string into that and print out a menu that way. So that's a good reason to break it out. So you could have intro this, next line, whatever you want to call it. Your next line is going to be hello and welcome. Something like that. So then I can do something like print intro dot center 60. And in my function, I could actually bring in a function in this. Then I could say print next line. And it prints that line. I could also center that so that it was centered on 60. So print next line dot center 60. Notice how that's nice and center up there. And then we can print an outro, which would be different characters. Or maybe it's a repeat of the first line before. Then you can just tell it to repeat. So it's very handy to write functions out that way that would repeat that code. So if it was over here, you could say def print menu. We could take something in, or we could set up something over here. So we could say intro out equals hashtag times 30. And then we could say message equals hello and welcome. And down here we can do put those into a list of things that we're all going to spit out. So we could do something like menu equals intro out, message, intro out. In this case, we just have 2 simple lines in here. Then we can do for item in menu, print item dot center on 60. That comes out. And then down here, we can just say print menu so that we call it at the beginning of our code. Run that. And notice how it makes a nice little menu header at the top of your screen. Now you can do more than that. Since you know that you have a character of 60 over here, You could then multiply this out by 60, rerun the code, and it's now going to center everything in between. If I want to right justify, I can use rjust, and then it's going to be however many characters I want to do from the right-hand side. So say I have this one here, and it prints the menu if you're going to do a big for loop, or you could justify it in some other way. So I could do something else that I want to do there. So it's great for printing out a bunch of information. You can use asterisks, you can use dashes, however you want to center those characters. Again, if you give it a character, it'll center through too. So say I have this one here and I center with this, but I also want to center it based on dashes like that. I can hit save, run module. Notice that now I've got these nice little dashes when it centers. When it tries to center the asterisk or the pound signs up here, there's no additional space because I already have 60 characters, and therefore you're not going to see that on there because we multiplied it by 60 up here. But if I multiplied it by 30, now you'll see that extra space. It's going to get filled with those dashes. So if you're trying to organize and format your output to make it look nice and clean, this is a great way to do that. You can start using R justifications, left justifications if you want them all aligned down the left-hand side. If you're trying to build columns or a screen or something like that, it's a great way to put that out there. Anybody have any questions on justification? Again, you got ljust, rightjust, and center. The first number in there is going to be the amount of the total space that you want to center or R justify that in, or left justify. The second spot to that is a additional variable if you want it, which would be a character that you wanted to center with. If you don't give it a character, it uses space by default. There's a couple more handy methods for removing white space, which is really nice. So you can have rstrip, left strip, and just strip. And what those commands will do is strip out extra things inside the character. So say they type in, you know, if you take in an input, again, they can type whatever they want, right? They can type 10 spaces, then they type their first name and submit it to you. You want to make sure that you strip off all that stuff in the beginning, or it's going to mess up whatever you're trying to do later in your program. So you could take that in and then tell it to strip, and by default, it's going to strip the space out of the beginning and the end, and therefore it cuts everything out there. It looks like this here. So you get hello world. If I want to strip everything just from the left side, there it strips it there. If I want to strip it from the right side, it strips everything on this side. So left strip is going to move it to the left, or strip everything from the left. Right strip is going to strip everything after whatever the last character is in there. You can also specify, so here it's doing spaces, but you can also specify what it's going to strip. So here they strip based on amp S, which ends up bringing back bacon, spam, and eggs. One module that you guys can play with when dealing with strings, which is kind of fun if you're going to interact with your program a little bit, is import Piperclip. So Piperclip is going to allow you to interact with your computer's clipboard. So if they're going out to a website or something, they copy a bunch of material in, and you want them to be able to dump that into your program, you can import Piperclip. You can do .copy, and it would copy in whatever in, or you could do .paste, and it takes anything that's on the current computer's clipboard and pastes it to the screen inside of it. So what does that look like? Over here, if I do import Piperclip, like that, and then I do Piperclip .paste. If I can spell correct, Piperclip .paste. That was the last thing that I copied and pasted on here. If I want to copy something internally here, so if I do Piperclip .copy and I say string 6, that would have been from, oh, I restarted the program since then. So if I do something like string 6 equals hello Jason, this is output from my program. right? Then I can do paperclip, copy, string 6, and it's there. And if I open up something like Notepad, paste it, it's going to paste the output of whatever I put it in the clipboard. So you can go two directional with it. You can have somebody paste something into your program, or you can have them send it out, which is really beneficial if you're printing like a table menu or something like that. You can just have it send that entire string out to the end user. So paperclip is a module. Again, you call it with paperclip, and then you're going to have paperclip.copy, paperclip.paste. That kind of wraps up in terms of the different modules. There's a ton of different methods that we covered today. So I encourage you to go through some of these practice projects that they have down here so you can have a better understanding of how those different ones work. When the quiz comes along, I'm going to be quizzing over all those different methods that are available for strings. And we'll cover more of that in depth. So the next quiz is actually not a quiz. I believe you're going to hit midterm at that point. So the midterm is at the end of next week, week 7. Yes. Yeah, midterm will be everything from the very beginning of the semester till whatever gets covered by the end of next week, which I believe next week is regex. So it's kind of nice. There's a lot of different things you can do. A lot of what you're going to be practicing in this particular section is things that you will use in your midterm project. So it's nice to go through, do those different assignments, do the different projects, see what's in there. On Thursday, we're going to go over a little bit of your assignment. So there is an assignment at the end of chapter 6, which is, which one was it? Make sure I got the right one. Table printer. So if we look down here, this one here. So this is one that people will get hung up on, and again, we'll cover it in more detail on Thursday. We'll also go back through some of those methods and kind of quiz you over them. But pay attention when you try to create this function that 1, you're supposed to be creating a function. 2, you want to make sure that you're getting these justified the way they should be. There should be no additional spaces in here. There should be no additional breaks. They should all be aligned correctly. It takes a little bit of work to get it to go right. So definitely go up here and go through some of these practice projects because that will help you figure out this week's assignment. If you can get a jump start on this week's assignment, you'll be in better shape. I do give you a little PowerPoint starter here on how to get going in that, and I'll help you with that on Thursday. Anybody have any questions over strings today? I know it seems a little bland and boring, but everything that you got today is things that you will use in your midterm project. It's how you clean up your code without having 20 if, elif statements to try to get something as clean as you were hoping to get it. And the only way you're going to figure out how they work is doing like I did in here today. Just go in and start creating random strings and then start chopping them. You can do slices, you can do index, you can start checking to see whether it's uppercase, lowercase, etc. It will make way more sense when you have a project and you're trying to get a desired output. Anybody else have any questions for today? All right, let me pause this here or end this.